Hi, I'm Femi OK. You're in the stream. We're live on Al Jazeera and YouTube. Fake news. If you tweet, watch TV, or even just talk politics with your friends, it's a phrase that you can't escape. But what does it really mean? Today, the stream explains. Now, although its first uses can be traced back more than 100 years, the current popularity of the phrase fake news is down to one man, US President Donald Trump. He first started using it as a weapon against his critics while campaigning, and since his election, he has used it numerous times. And Trump has now said that he plans on Wednesday to hand out awards for fake news. The announcement prompted ridicule from many, with several comedians actively campaigning to be nominated. A Politico tally at the end of last year found that the phrase has become a favourite of authoritarian governments, with leaders of state media in at least 15 countries using it to attack journalists. So what does fake news really mean, and is it even a useful description? Joining to help us answer these questions, Claire Wardle, Research Fellow at the Shorenstein Center at the Harvard Kennedy School and Director of First Draft News. Paul Levinson is Professor of Media Studies at Fordham University, author of Fake News in Real Context. And Michelle Chula-Lipkin is Executive Director of the National Association for Media Literacy Education. And guests, before we jump into the conversation, I want to show you a clip. This is early on Wednesday, US Republican Senator Jeff Flake making news about fake news. Have a look.
Now we are told via Twitter that today the president intends to announce his choice for the, quote, most corrupt and dishonest media awards. It beggars belief that an American president would engage in such a spectacle. But here we are.
Paul, here we are. Have we reached peak fake news? Is this the moment where we've just maxed out on the term?
No, I don't think so. I think we still have a ways to go. And by the way, I just want to say, not only comedians, but I've now sent several tweets to Trump urging him to give my book, Fake News in Real Context,
I've seen them.
an award for fake news.
Yeah.
I know. So, so far, no response. But the fact is, fake news is a burgeoning issue because Trump won't let it go. And what started out first as people being concerned about real fake news, which is almost an oxymoron, but news that was fake, Trump cleverly twisted into an attack on any news that he finds unwelcome or in the least bit critical. And so a day doesn't go by, because he does so many things worthy of criticism, that someone on some media platform isn't being critical of him, and his now standard routine is to denounce it as fake news. And that's very damaging to our political system. Senator Flake is completely right. We need to speak out about this.
Michelle.
I agree. I think, you know, the fake news conversation is very limiting and also quite dangerous. And although it has definitely put a spotlight on some important issues in our culture, certainly around information flow, it's really limiting in the sense that it's been co-opted. The term itself has been co-opted, as Paul said, to really just focus on, what we don't want to believe, and that is not what fake news is and never was.
What is it, Michelle?
It can be really dangerous.
You teach media literacy. What do you tell in your 101 fake news class? What do you tell people it is?
Well, fake news is deliberate false information that deliberately is created to manipulate, right? It's deliberately false. It is not stuff that we don't agree with. It's not inaccuracies. It's not things that we just don't have all the information for yet. So far in Trump's presidency, we spend a lot of time talking about what fake news isn't, right? Because he's really focused on it being all that shines a negative light on him and his administration. And anyone that's been doing this work for as long as we have knows that that is absolutely not the case. And it's actually not helping.
Yeah, let me just say, the New York Times has long had an errata section at the bottom of the front page where they list the mistakes that they make. The media are run by human beings. People make mistakes all the time. But the key point indeed about fake news, real fake news, is that it's a form of propaganda propaganda, which is created entirely to deceive people. So it's not an honest mistake. It's not something that's just false. It's something that's intentionally false.
Claire, let me show you this. We asked our audience, Claire, to define fake news, and we got so many definitions. Have a look at some of them. Why the confusion, Claire? I think everybody's got a different definition. Why?
Well, this is why your program is so great, because your audience members are so smart. But I actually don't use the term F asterisk 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 news for this reason, because actually it means so many different things to so many different people. It's actually become entirely meaningless. And I do love the stream because you allow us a long time to discuss really complex issues, but we shouldn't be doing a show about this because Trump has won. He had a sensationalist tweet and the journalists have run towards him, and we're now having a show discussing it. So as ever, his tweets have led to more coverage, and we shouldn't be doing it because the term is meaningless and it's dangerous.
All right, let's make this meaningful.
I disagree with that. I disagree with that completely.
Go on.
What Trump is doing is undermining our media. He's undermining our legitimate media when he calls out Jim Acosta on CNN and says, "You're fake news," and when he bellows about NBC and the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and denies things that we have him on videotape saying. When he makes those attacks, he's attacking the very foundation of media and journalism in a free society. That's exactly
that's why it's so important.
Let me
I completely agree. It's so important and we shouldn't trivialize it. We should be talking about it in a way it's very thoughtful.
Let me put this to you. This is Tutalini Assina. Have a look here, what he shared with us. It is incredibly frustrating that we give the term legitimacy by continued use. And let me just go across here to where Claire has been talking about fake news. And she actually won't even say the word. She says F asterisk asterisk N asterisk asterisk. And I remember the very first time we talked to you, you said it was a misinformation ecosystem, Claire. You wouldn't even say the word. Can we navigate this without even saying the word?
Are we talking about misinformation, which is mistakes that people don't mean any harm? Do we mean disinformation, where people know it's harmful and they're deliberately pushing out? Are we talking about propaganda? And my issue about the term news is it's focused on text. A bigger issue of visuals. The biggest vehicles of disinformation are visuals, memes, videos. And actually, when we keep focusing on these websites, we're missing that. The platforms aren't analyzing visuals. We don't take them seriously. And they're actually much more powerful because our brains are a lot less likely to be critical of visuals. So I just think the term is unhelpful. I completely agree with Paul. This is one of the most serious issues we currently face. The undermining of a free press globally is terrifying. So the idea that we're talking about an awards, I just think we should have a different conversation on a different day about a really serious topic.
All right, Claire.
I would just say that the truth is that if we can take this fake news conversation and leverage it to have the bigger conversations and the more important conversations about how we understand the information ecosystem as a whole, that's what's really important. To me, it's we do not understand, and we do not, certainly in the United States, really teach our students to understand the entire information landscape. And that's everything from misinformation to inaccuracies, to fact, to fiction, to credibility, to bias, to all of these layers. The information ecosystem is so nuanced, and by just focusing on fake news, we're limiting ourselves to being worried just, are we duped? Is this true? And those are not the conversations that are going to help us understand the information ecosystem which we are living in. And it's really important that we move beyond fake news in that way. And I agree with Claire and Paul. This is really vital. So how can we leverage this moment in time to put a spotlight on these bigger issues about understanding information as it exists today? Okay, let's do some leveraging.
Yeah,
this
is Mark Nola. Paul, hold tight for a moment. This is Mark Nola from CBS. I just want to clarify what's happening on Wednesday. It says the White House will be announcing fake news awards later today. This is real. I'm sure you're all waiting to see if you're big winners. This is Sanders. She's telling reporters. Here she is. She's the White House spokesperson, as you well know. Let's go back to Senator Jeff Flake. He's a Republican senator. When we're talking about leveraging this conversation, what is important? He pointed that out earlier today on the Senate floor. Have a look.
This feedback loop is disgraceful, Mr. President. Not only has the past year seen an American president borrow despotic language to refer to the free press, but it seems he has now, in turn, inspired dictators and authoritarians with his own language. That is reprehensible.
Claire, Gwen Lister here says on Twitter, she tweeted this to us, this is about news leaders, what they don't like. The truth hurts. This is what we're really talking about. We're not talking about news that isn't real. We're talking about what political leaders don't want to tell their public. Absolutely. And now, because of social media, politicians had to rely on the media to get their message out up until 5, 6, 7 years ago. Now they can talk directly to their people via social media. So by discrediting the mainstream media, they're saying, you don't go over there, don't listen to that information, just come straight to me. You can't trust them. So this is part and parcel of the role of social media in societies. But it's exactly this. This has become a slur for any politician to put down the types of information they don't like, investigative reporting they don't like. And that's why it's so dangerous and so worrying. Paul.
I agree. Let me just say something about visual media, though, because I think this is important, and Claire made this point earlier. You know, there's a general expression, seeing is believing, and what that does is it makes a video or a photograph much more likely to be able to deceive someone, because we sort of psychologically think if we're looking at an image or even an image in motion, then somehow it must be true. And this actually vastly predates Trump. There's an infamous photograph of Abraham Lincoln in which he looks very presidential. It turns out they put Abraham Lincoln's face on someone else's more
attractive body.
Yes, exactly. Or, for example, the darkening of O.J. Simpson's photograph when he was first arrested, you know, to make him look darker. So, I mean, this has been going on for a while, but it's been taken now to a new level. And in addition to what we're saying about we need to be very strong in opposing what Trump is trying to do, at the same time, we do need to encourage people to be more skeptical of what they're seeing with their eyes if they see an image or they see a video, because it's so easy to manipulate them.
And that's why media literacy education, putting in a plug for that work, is so vital, because media literacy education is looking at all media and not just news, also advertising, also entertainment, visual literacy. All of this stuff matters. And again, it goes to the fact, are we asking the right questions? And I think what's interesting about what's happening in the U.S. right now, just today, this idea that our president is having a fake news awards show is really mind-blowing to people in the United States, and especially because, you know, what are the resources and what are the time and energy of our government? You know, what is it going towards, right? And so there's a lot of people in the U.S. that are obviously very disturbed by the time and energy that's going into this, and we need to be really wary of that.
See, Misty Knight says here she is on, or he is on YouTube. Misty Knight says, you fight fake news by not believing everything you hear. Make sure you seek the truth by looking into everything and making up your mind based off proven facts and reliable sources. Misty Knight's potentially be a journalist. Black Genesis. The public is much more informed about how corrupt government officials use false flags to achieve their desired results. Claire, are you finding that the public is now getting much more informed?
I think on one level, one concern we have is that trust in all types of institutions is dropping. So trust in governments or democracies or the press. And that's a real worry. So I think at one level, these conversations have meant that we're really training more people in how do you actually analyze the information or the visuals that you're seeing. We're having much more interesting conversations about the quality of information that we have in our social feeds. But my concern is that almost this discussion as well is also turning people off about institutions in general. So I worry that it's easier now for people to say, I can't trust my politician, I can't trust my local journalist, and we're going to turn inwards to one another. And I don't think that's the kind of society that we all want to live in.
That's a really good
agree,
point.
but
A really good point.
You know, but it is also true that now, as never before in history, any individual does have a way of confirming sources, confirming stories. And I always tell my students, if you see something online, anything, and it strikes you as maybe not being true or completely true, it's never been easier for you to Google that phrase or term and see, well, what is the New York Times? What is CNN saying? What even is Fox News saying? In other words, we have all of these sources. And so these are tools that we now have, which we didn't have, you know, a couple of decades ago or even 10 years ago, to basically check and see whether what we're seeing in one place is true or not.
Let me share with you this comment from Rachel Artiega. She's an elementary school teacher, so she teaches kids between the ages of 8 and 10. This is what she told us that she's doing about fake news. Have a look.
We teach our upper elementary school students about fake news by first introducing them to the idea of images and how images are naturally biased, and then looking at how altered images, if answering the question whether they really portray what they're supposed to or if they tell a different story. And that serves as our entry point for talking about how news articles are biased and how altering facts can also create a different story that veers away from the truth.
Michelle, this is your love. This is your life. This is what you do.
Yes.
Education.
Yeah, so Rachel is one of our wonderful members, and she is one of the thousands of folks in the U.S. really working incredibly hard in classrooms every day, trying to decipher some of this conversation, and it's really important. And I think that you know, just to add on to the conversation about skepticism, I think it's really important to note that another danger of the fake news conversation is the fact that it could make people cynical, and that is not media literacy, and that's not an effective way to maneuver and navigate this information. We need some informed skepticism, as Paul said, that it's really, really important that we teach, you know, people how to ask questions about all the media they're seeing, and ask questions before they share, and ask questions about, you know, different sources, and really create these habits of inquiry. And that is about skepticism. We don't want people to stop believing anything is true. And that's the danger of the fake news conversation. And it certainly doesn't give any credit to a very hardworking press that we have in the United States. You know, it's a really bad time to be a journalist in the U.S., and that's something that's very concerning to all of us in education.
Interesting comment here about legislation and what Germany is actually doing about fake news. Claire, let me share this with you. How do you stop fake news, asked the Chicago Tribune, in Germany with a law? I know you've been working with the EU, you've been working with lots of different organisations about how do we stop this tide of fake news. Legislation?
I think that's a terrible thing.
Paul, I hear that.
Okay.
Let me just pick up with Claire, because I know, Claire, you've been working with the EU, and then Paul, I know you're eager to get in, so your follow-up just then. Claire, go ahead.
So this partly goes back to my issues with definition, because if the phrase that we're using is not helpful and it means a million different things to a million different people, you can't regulate something when you're not clear what you're regulating. And in fact, the German law is actually around hate speech. But what we're seeing is that the platforms are so terrified about being fined that it's only been around since the 1st of January. We're seeing a lot of content being taken down because they're terrified of being fined, so they're taking down more than we would be happy with. So it's definitely moving into censorship. So we've had Macron from France talking about potentially passing a law. And Paul is right. I think in the US, we're very worried about regulation. But my fear in Europe, a number of different European countries, this is a knee-jerk reaction because there's this panic around the term. But until we can actually sort out what do we mean? Do we mean 100% fabricated news websites that are made for profit? Or are we talking about misleading content, hyper-partisan content, memes, visuals, manipulated video? This is very complicated. And so regulation, we're not at a point yet where we're even able to do that because we can't agree on the terms.
Paul?
Yeah.
Well, I agree with that completely, what Claire said. It's extremely dangerous to bring the government in in any kind of regulation of media. First of all, here in the United States, that violates our First Amendment, which says Congress shall make no law abridging freedom of speech or the press. And that First Amendment is extremely important and has never been more important when you have someone like Donald Trump in the White House. And he could order the FCC to basically fine CNN and NBC anytime they broadcast a story that Trump found to his disliking, which we know happens probably dozens of times a day. So I think that Germany's law was well-intentioned, but it's the worst possible response to fake news. A far better response is asking the social media to take better care to the extent that they can in their dissemination of fake news.
Yeah, I think it's going to take a combination of solutions, right? And obviously, it's no surprise that my advice is education, because the truth is regulation also addresses today's fake news, right? It doesn't account for what's going to happen in 5 years down the line and 10 years down the line. And that's where education comes in, because what we're looking at is really building skills, right? And skills that can, surpass technology changes and media changes. And that's what's really important about education as a tool to resolve some of these issues. It's not obviously going to, help us solve all the ills in the world, but education is really, really key to the solutions of these problems.
J.K. Silgum Media says here on Twitter, teaching students about fake news can be a lot of fun for both myself as an educator and for the students, but it also can be a huge challenge. I feel like this is going to be the part of every single curriculum, if not already, in the very near future. Guess I'm just wondering what you make of this. Facebook has a lot of work to do. Mark Zuckerberg's personal challenge for 2018, his New Year's resolution, was making Facebook better. Claire?
Yeah, well, some of the viewers might know that there was an announcement last week where Facebook said it's actually going to change its algorithm slightly. So in our feed in Facebook, we're much more likely to see content shared by our friends and family and content that we're engaging around. So some people are arguing that this is them saying, you know what, news is hard. It's difficult to publish and decide what to publish, and to think about pollution in a way that how do you clean up the streets of Facebook? And so some people are arguing that this is why they've made this move. I think it's more complex than that, but I think they have recognized that Mark Zuckerberg has gone from just after the election in the US in November 2016 to say it was a crazy idea that **** news played a part, to saying, yes, this is really difficult, we can do all that we can, to, you know what, I think we might go back to more cat videos, which I'm being simplistic, but my worry is that actually as more and more people get their news from social media, the idea that we're going to take more of that content away from the newsfeed because it's difficult and people don't like to talk about it. And, the stuff that we really talk about and engage on Facebook from a news perspective, controversial content, opinionated content. And my fear is that the algorithm is going to be driven in a way that we're just going to get more sensational news and not the information that we need to know as citizens living in a society.
Paul, I think what's really important about the Facebook conversation is that, just regardless of whatever changes they're going to make, and I think it's going to continue to evolve, what's most important to me from a media literacy perspective is their transparency about those changes. Are they being honest with their consumers? Are they being honest with the audience and to the people that are using their site? How can they be more transparent about their algorithms, about the way they sell ads, about the way they, manage our news feeds? And I think, you can focus a little bit on the changes they're making, but I think what's more important is to really make sure that they're being transparent about those changes and giving us that information.
Sure. Paul, go ahead.
And I would just add there's a bill that's being proposed in the U.S. Senate called the Honest Ads Act that, again, would penalize Facebook if it put up an ad and it was not correctly identified as an ad. Now, it's a very important point, and Facebook is right to have made this change where they are more carefully identifying ads as ads, just as they are already identified newspapers on television. But
Paul,
getting
appreciate
the government involved,
we're right at the end of our show. Who knew that we could spend so long talking about something that's not real? Paul Levinson, Michelle Chula-Lipkin, and Claire Wardle, thank you so much for helping us unpack this term, where are we going with this, and being a prelude to the fake news awards by the President of the United States. Appreciate it. The conversation continues, as always. #AJStream. See you online.